Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to today's webinar on getting back on the road to recovery, incorporating the 8 dimensions of wellness and recovery goal planning. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Katia Rivera, and I'm the project coordinator of the center and will be facilitating the webinar today. Next slide, please. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other work-related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC Network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up at the bit.ly link provided on the screen. Next slide, please. Following the webinar, you will be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. Next slide. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides in the next couple of days. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please use the chat feature to answer these questions. Next slide, please. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. This presentation will be recorded and posted on our website. At the time of this presentation, Eleanor McCants-Katz is serving as SAMHSA Assistant Secretary. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the presenters and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS, SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Now let's begin our webinar. We have Joni Dolce with us today. Joni is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions at the Rutgers School of Health Professions. Joni has several years of experience working in behavioral healthcare settings, namely support employment. Joni teaches courses in the department's undergraduate program, as well as providing training and technical assistance to behavioral healthcare providers. Her research interests include staff training and employment services, and she presents nationally on the topic of employment services and is listed as a Society of Human Resource Management recommended speaker on the topic of creating workplaces that support mental health. So now I will turn it over to Joni and welcome everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kati. For some reason, my computer is acting strange, but thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Kati. And we are going to talk a little bit today about the 8 dimensions of wellness. We have an hour to review the 8 dimensions and also to discuss and identify different strategies to incorporate the 8 dimensions of wellness into your current services or practices. As Kati mentioned, we are hoping to have this be as interactive as possible. So use the chat feature. use the Q&A if you have specific questions, but we're going to be asking you throughout the webinar to use the chat function to answer some questions. Many are just yes or no type questions, but some are more expansive and want some additional comment from you. When we talk about SMART goal planning in particular, we're going to have a very interactive element during that time. Full disclosure, I am home, so I am hearing lots of leaf blowing going on outside. We're here in the Northeast and lots of trees are shedding their leaves. So I apologize in advance if you hear any leaf blowing or two teenagers walking around behind me. So anyway, let's get started. And it looks like some people were already using the chat box to say hello to one another. I saw people talking about where they were from and what types of positions they have in the organization. Keep that going, kind of use that as a tool to introduce each other. But let's get started looking at some of what we're going to discuss today. It's not necessarily a follow-up to what I did a similar webinar a couple of weeks ago talking about recovery goals and revisiting and refocusing on recovery goals in light of the pandemic and helping people that you're working with to refocus on those community integration and recovery goals. And this follows up a tad. We'll touch a little bit on what we spoke about on October 30th. So there may be a couple of duplicate areas, but why don't we get started talking about recovery? And just to orient all of us, we are really looking at using this recovery framework and helping people to identify recovery-oriented goals, goals that include where people live, where people learn, work, and socialization goals. And William Anthony, who sadly passed away earlier this year, was one of the initial recovery theorists, along with Pat Deegan and many others. But he identified recovery as involving the development of a new meaning and purpose in one's life as one grows beyond the catastrophic effects of a mental illness. And it's important to frame a discussion of wellness around recovery, and we'll talk about the interaction between recovery and wellness. But if you wanted to use the chat and just jot down really quickly what recovery means to you when you think about recovery, many people have an idea, and it's certainly accurate, that recovery means the complete absence of symptoms or the lessening of symptoms, or using mental health services less frequently. Another definition is similar to what Bill Anthony is writing in here, developing that new sense of purpose and meaning beyond having a diagnosis of a mental health condition. And it looks like there are a few people writing in the chat. And Kadi, I don't know if you're able to kind of read what those chats are as I
Sure.
move
So
to the next.
we have a response here, having hope for the future.
Having hope for the future, absolutely. So kind of having that sense of a future that includes goals beyond just receiving mental health services, absolutely.
Rising, going forward, resilience, a new sober life with fulfilling their goals, redefining their self. Recovery means the feeling of control and well-being in life. And then we have having a life which is fulfilling.
Absolutely. So let's kind of use that momentum as we move forward, thinking about that in having a new sense of well-being. Let's look at why wellness is important and how it does relate to recovery. When we think about wellness, it really is this critical, vital piece of recovery from mental health conditions or substance use disorders. Many people with mental health conditions who are receiving mental health or substance use services on average are dying much earlier than people without mental health conditions. Lots of research has really shown that this is accurate, and some research has shown that 25 to sometimes 35 years earlier than the general population. So for people receiving mental health services, people with mental health conditions, focusing on wellness and well-being is critical. We know that people with mental health conditions also have comorbid physical issues such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity. So really helping someone to achieve wellness goals is something that as a field is vitally important. So Dr. Peggy Swarbrick has written extensively about wellness. Dr. Swarbrick, and as we discussed the 8 dimensions of wellness, created the dimensions and packaged those in a way that are very easy to kind of look at and a way to really get a better sense of the areas of wellness that we need to be mindful of in terms of our own wellness and lifestyle decisions that we make. Dr. Swarbrick identified wellness as being a conscious, deliberate process that requires a person to become aware of and make choices for a more satisfying lifestyle. Kind of creating a lifestyle that's centered on wellness includes continually seeking out more information about how we can improve ourselves and how we can realize our full potential. And as we talk about the 8 dimensions that Dr. Swarbrick identified, we'll talk about how we can assist individuals that we're working with to realize their full potential in those areas. In our field, we are all seeking to reduce or limit or minimize the impact of the illness to help individuals that we're working with improve and enhance the quality of life that they have. And oftentimes that means helping someone identify wellness goals in order to potentially help them achieve recovery goals like worker, student, spouse, and so on. So these are the 8 dimensions of wellness. We'll talk about each one in a little bit of detail. I do see that there are some chat comments. I don't know if there's anything, Kati, that we would want to address before we move forward.
Well, we have some comments, more definitions of recovery and wellness. It says, to me, recovery is a continuous action of constantly improving yourself, belief in that all things are possible, not identifying with your illness or being identified by your illness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about each of the areas of wellness. And this probably doesn't look very different to many of the wellness wheels that you may have seen in the past. And again, this is adapted from Dr. Swarbrick's work. And SAMHSA has adopted the 8 dimensions of wellness in their work. And I have several resources at the end of the presentation, and many of those are tools and workbooks and websites that you'll be able to access to get additional information and to follow up on any of the research or information that I might discuss today. So let's first focus on the circle here in the middle, emotional wellness. And as we go through each of the areas of wellness or each of the dimensions of wellness, I want you to really also think about your own wellness, particularly during this time in the pandemic, and think about how you are managing or working deliberately and consciously, as Dr. Swarbrick noted in that previous slide that I referenced, toward wellness in each of these areas. So, and we're going to explore a couple of different assessment tools and quizzes that you can use to better assess your own wellness as well as individuals you're working with. So why don't we get started? So when we think about this first emotional wellness, we're really looking at that idea of helping someone improve or recognize that the feelings and thoughts and emotions that they have contribute to their wellness, and helping individuals identify healthy ways to manage and deal with stress that they may be encountering, or you may be encountering now during this really stressful time in our world with the pandemic and remote work, and using resources like telehealth that are new, and oftentimes many of us haven't received adequate training or training at all. So thinking about those emotional well-being, or that dimension of emotion, and helping someone learn that ability to express feelings and emotions, and really centering in on how to improve that emotional wellness. Then we'll move into occupational wellness. And as Kati mentioned in my intro, a lot of my work is in the Integrated Employment Institute here in our department. And a lot of that focuses on employment and helping individuals achieve employment related goals. So there's a real sense of I really believe that this idea of an occupational wellness and helping people achieve occupational goals, whether that's career goals and helping someone access education to find careers and be qualified for careers that they're interested in, or helping someone right now identify an immediate employment setting that matches their interests and values, but helping someone to really identify what are their skills, what are they good at, what are those areas in their life that really equate to occupational or careers, that having someone identify activities that provide meaning, that are satisfying to them, that are rewarding, really improving that area of wellness. Oftentimes, as we teach in the Institute, the Employment Institute, often may help improve other areas of wellness. So if you think about looking at the 8 dimensions and helping someone enhance the occupational dimension of wellness, that may in fact help them enhance other areas like social. They may be able to connect more with people if they're working, or financial, of course. If you're working, your financial dimension of wellness may be improved or enhanced. So if you think of these dimensions in a way, and Dr. Swarbrick talks about this, if you think about the dimensions as sort of building on one another, so improving one area or one dimension may in fact help you enhance or help the individual enhance those other areas. Kati, it looks like we have something in the chat that just came through.
Yes, we have a comment that says when we facilitate RAP seminars, we actually use this wheel for participants to develop wellness tools in this area.
Yes, and I think SAMHSA may have resources and posters that you could order or download on one of the resources that I list in the back, that you could even maybe see if you would be able to download it or order certain posters or larger sizes of the 8 dimensions of wellness wheel to hang in office spaces or other spaces in your organization. That's a great comment. Thank you for mentioning that. If we go into intellectual, we're really talking about helping someone learn new skills, learn or even apply what someone has already learned. So it could be helping someone go back to school, or it could be helping someone to learn skills that may not be equated to returning to school to get a degree, but other skills that could certainly help intellectually. It could be finding like-minded people to have conversations with, or other types of intellectual activities that could enhance that area. The physical dimension right now is something that I know personally I'm struggling with during the pandemic, is maintaining that physical wellness and trying really hard to exercise and eat healthy. It's very difficult when you're working remotely, but that's something that helping people, as we mentioned earlier on in the presentation, individuals with mental health conditions are more likely to have co-occurring physical health conditions. So helping someone to improve those areas of wellness is certainly part of our role in the public health system or behavioral health community. But physical wellness can include helping someone to increase energy by exercising or reducing health problems that someone might have. All of these may impact a person's emotional wellness. If you're really feeling like you're not taking care of yourself physically, oftentimes that does come out in these other areas, whether it's work, you're not really feeling 100%, or you're feeling a little down or feeling a little bit sluggish, and it's hard to get going, or spiritual, it's hard to get moving and accessing the spiritual parts of our lives that are meaningful to us if we're not physically feeling well. So really oftentimes that physical dimension helps to improve or enhance other areas as well. But it could be getting adequate sleep, exercising, making sure that your nutrition is decent, or at least, you know, pretty good, making sure that you're making some reasonable and healthy decisions regarding your physical wellness. So let's move into spiritual, since we kind of touched on that a little bit, but helping someone or yourself, if we're using this for our own well-being, really identifying ways to improve the spiritual wellness could be helping someone to access different events or activities that help improve that spiritual dimension, and whether that's connecting with spiritual areas in their region, or again, like-minded people who share similar ideas and thoughts, or it could be even something more internal. It could be helping someone to identify other ways that improve or enhance that spiritual dimension, and that could mean meditation or other types of strategies. But whatever that person finds meaningful and helpful, helping that person develop those tools or resources to access those spiritual components. And then we want to talk about financial, and again, that occupational wellness dimension could really have a positive impact on someone's finances. But looking at helping someone financially, or your own financial wellness, are you mired in debt? Do you have any strategies to get out of debt? Are there ways that you can increase your finances to help you feel more financially well, or have that wellness not be so negatively impacted? Are there ways that you can budget to help with that dimension? So thinking about all of the different tools that we might be able to help provide people to improve that particular area of wellness. And it might be helping someone to learn or develop a budget, or learn how to, access a side hustle, if you will, or, some sort of other type of employment opportunity, whether it's, like a full-time position, or something to add to what someone's already doing, but somehow helping with that financial wellness dimension. It looks like we have another couple of comments in the chat. Hi, Kati.
Yes, they're referring to the spirituality component, as hope is also a spiritual practice.
Absolutely. So sometimes we as practitioners, oftentimes, and this is a phrase that's coined often in the psych rehab field and behavioral health field, and others have said this, but hold the hope for people. Sometimes people don't feel very hopeful. Sometimes people aren't very optimistic. And again, I love the way that person who commented sort of wove that into the spiritual wellness. Absolutely, feeling that hope is certainly part of that spirituality, and thinking about ways to cultivate and help someone feel more hopeful are all part of our role. And then let's look at social. So social looks a little bit different these days, right? It's not quite as easy to socialize as maybe it once was pre-pandemic, or for some people, it might even be easier, might be more access to people that they wouldn't normally be able to interact with, maybe having remote or FaceTime or other types of opportunities improve someone's social wellness. So identifying with the person, what are those areas that they can continue to socialize, and it may be the Zoom, weekly call with family, or the FaceTime, or even just the regular old, regular phone. But having those social relationships, family, friends, helping people connect with people who have an interest, shared interest, and helping to connect with people who are natural supports, natural people in their lives. So people that aren't necessarily paid providers, but people who can provide that social support, who are natural to their environment, coworkers, other students, friends, people at the gym, whatever it might be, but helping people to improve that social dimension. And then finally, environmental really includes kind of those spaces that we participate in as citizens. It was noted that learning, living, really helping to find areas, environmental, like our job or our educational environment. So choosing schools if possible, and certainly jobs that are a good match and sort of include the values that we have and are congruent with what we believe are important values, beliefs, attitudes. So finding environments that are conducive to that really does help us improve that wellness in that particular dimension. So you don't need to have 100% satisfaction in each of these areas, right? I mean, if I could look at this myself and do a quick assessment, I know I have certain areas that are okay, and then certain areas that are way not okay, that could certainly use some support and some help. So I think we all probably have a little bit of that as well. Kati, it looks like there are lots of chats going on. I don't know anything we wanted to review before we moved into our next stage, which is assessing wellness.
We're providing feedback, but I think we can move forward.
Yep, housing, it looks like. Absolutely. Outdoor, environmental, sunshine, vitamin D. It's not very sunny here in the Northeast today, or at least my part of the Northeast. And the last few days have been so sunny and beautiful, and I'm so regretting not getting out there as often. So if you have a chance to enjoy the sunshine wherever you are, take advantage of it, because it's fleeting. But let's look into, yeah, Rachel just said in the chat, finding meaning in one's life. Absolutely, I agree. Let's look at assessing wellness. And these are two assessments. There are probably many, many others. And when you look into the resource section of this PowerPoint, you'll probably find quite a few more. But I did want to go into looking at a couple of these websites. One was actually written by Dr. Swarbrick and another person here in New Jersey, Jay Udolph. And I'm going to start sharing that, Kati, if you can just give me a heads up that you can see it.
Not yet.
Okay.
There it is.
So this is one, not the one I was referring to. For whatever reason, this one popped up instead, but that's okay. I was going to show this next, but this certain assessment is really kind of an interesting one. It's, if you look, I won't go through the entire assessment, but if you go through the left here on the blue part where it talks about the wellness wheel and gives some suggestions on how to use the key, and it's from 1 to 5. It talks about how 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So 1 would be, I'm very unhappy with that particular part of my life. 5 is, I'm completely happy and fulfilled in this part of my life. There's no need for improvement. And if you notice, the person who filled this out, you can see like a little tiny marked checked line that you connect the dots, so to speak. So you're connecting the dots, and you can notice that this person really has some lower areas of wellness in terms of their financial, environmental, physical is really at a 1 for this person. And then it sort of pops up a little bit for intellectual, and then spiritual is a 5. So even if you're tracing those dots, you can even visually see where it juts out higher. So using something like this for yourself, using something like this as a tool with individuals you're working with, it's just sort of a neat visual. Of course, you could do this without having this visual and connecting the dots, but sometimes having that chart and being able to see like, wow, I really am, my low areas are really kind of clustered around very low points, 1, 2. So it's just, again, a quick little assessment. Might be useful to use with yourself first, just to kind of see how it works, and just to give yourself sort of that better understanding of where you're at in your well-being. For me, anyway, this isn't my chart, but when I was kind of mocking it up for myself, it really, again, highlighted that physical wellness as being so low, and kind of gave me pause and made me realize I really need to start working on that. So I'm going to stop sharing this now and then go back to the presentation. Let's see. Oops. Yes, Angela, you'll have access to the forms. They're right in the PowerPoint. They go right to the website. I apologize. I'm just, for whatever reason, my computer is not cooperating at the moment, and it just is knocking me out of my PowerPoint. So I just want to just spend a minute. I apologize. It's never done that before, Kati. I truly have no access to my PowerPoint, but I will get it up. And if you all want to use the chat to identify other assessments that you might have used in your work with people, or in your own wellness, and helping with your own kind of a better understanding where you're at with your wellness, by all means, please use.
Yes, so while Joni retrieves her slides, I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, we will be emailing everyone a copy of Joni's slides, as well as a link to the recording and a link to our evaluation. So that will be emailed to the email that you registered on our Zoom link today.
Okay, let's see.
So while Joni retrieves her slides, I also wanted to ask if anyone had any questions, to also feel free to enter your comments or questions in the chat. So during the Q&A time, she will be able to address the questions if we have time.
So strange. Kati, I don't know if you're able to pull them up. This is very odd. My computer doesn't typically act this way. Are you able, let's see. Maybe we
Yes,
can do
I
this.
can pull them up. No worries.
And you can, thank you. Unless you're able to see what's up there now.
Let's see. Yes, but I would need to.
Okay, maybe you could pull them up. We apologize. I'm so sorry. I don't know what is going on with my computer, but it looks like we do have some chat. Yes. Okay. So people, yes, you're right, Eileen. Yeah, we can certainly talk from just without the notes, but while we wait for Kati to bring up her her information. But yes, what I'd like to, let me stop the share though. So when we think about incorporating the 8 dimensions of wellness, I'm going to pose a question to you. How can you incorporate the 8 dimensions into your services? And I want you to think about your intake and assessments, any goal planning that you do, skill building, and support planning. So think about in the intake, what are ways that you can include discussions around and other elements of the 8 dimensions of wellness? So if you can use the chat to identify what that might look like. So if you're using your, if you're meeting with someone for the first time during that initial meeting, what are some specific strategies that you think you could use when you are working with someone during that initial intake? Okay, so it looks like we have a few coming in. Elizabeth, I think you could discuss the 8 dimensions when a strengths assessment is done. Absolutely. We have a member self-assessment questionnaire that covers these elements, questions in all 8 dimensions of wellness as an intake. Absolutely. I love that, all of these ideas. So having questions during the intake that address each of these areas and sends a message that not only are you going to certainly provide support around those areas, but also it sends the message that this is important to pay attention to. We are mindful and recognize the importance of paying attention to the 8 dimensions. It's not just, you know, blinders on, just looking at one area, but really helping to address each of these dimensions. And someone mentioned, going off of what Elizabeth just said, we ask the questionnaire when we redo service plans. So once every few weeks. So Hannah kind of piggybacked on what Elizabeth said. Yes. So not just leaving it at the intake, but continuing to use it throughout the goal planning process, throughout any types of skill building or resource development or resource planning that you intend to do. Rachel is saying in the chat, of course, it's individual to each person. I think actually allowing someone to see the wheel itself provides some tangible things for people to think about. Absolutely. That's why I like that little brief wheel that we just looked at with the points that you can connect the dots, and it does kind of give someone a real nice visual. Weekly updates, Adrian said, so asking or getting or having the person provide weekly updates is really important. This is all, yes, very helpful. So now let's look at what the, next slide, please. What has been maybe the impact of COVID-19 on wellness, and specifically, what challenges have you observed that impact individuals' wellness goals? So just kind of quickly in the chat, maybe write down, like, what are some of the challenges that you might have observed that are impacting people's wellness goals, which ultimately are impacting potentially other goals that people are looking for. Isolation affects the social dimension. Mealy, absolutely. Isolation, we got another one from Diana. I think that's, I think we're going to see, and I alluded to that when we were talking about the dimensions, that that social dimension right now is really probably getting a hit and impacted negatively during this pandemic. Wellness tools are outside of the home, yes. So usually it's maybe a gym or library or whatever that other wellness tool might be. Eileen, I've encountered a lot of homeless persons with no help to be found. Loss of jobs affects the occupational and financial dimensions. Yes, people are losing jobs, or if people had supplementary type jobs in addition to other like full-time jobs, they're certainly losing that portion of income. Physical challenges, decreased access to healthcare and activities, isolation, unable to navigate virtual meetings. Absolutely. Helplessness and hopelessness right now. That's true, Rachel. There is a lot. And, you know, as practitioners, we may be feeling that as well. It may be sort of this universal feeling that we all need to pay attention to and be aware of. Boredom is a problem with some of the participants. Spirituality, very good preaching going on television. Yep. So they've been able to transfer lots of in-person activities to remotely. But this idea of boredom. Next slide, Kati, please. And what you echo, what you are identifying were really a lot of challenges that we identified. We had, there was a survey that was distributed to New York providers, just quickly to give you a little background, and some of the challenges related to individuals receiving services really echo some of those wellness challenges or concerns that you all brought up. Increase in symptoms, anxiety, fear, isolation was something that the providers who filled out the survey also indicated as a significant challenge that individuals are facing. So it's even more important to pay attention to wellness and well-being during that time in all of these areas. And the research kind of echoed that. Kati, next slide, please. So we're going to move into goals. I just want to, Mealy has a positive side. It's always nice to end on a positive side before we transition. On a positive side, I found a lot of trainings and digital resources available that contribute to the intellectual dimension, but technology and language barriers affect people's access to those resources. Absolutely, those trainings are available, digital resources are available, but sometimes the technology, as we just saw, does not always adequately work, or doesn't sometimes, you know, it's not as streamlined as it could be in certain situations, or the access, that digital divide is so great in certain areas of our country that even access to the technology and resources is very limited. So yes, I wanted to end on that positive note, but I think I somehow made that into a negative with the access is limited. But I think the positive side is yes, there are trainings, and there was something going around that Harvard, I think it was Harvard, was offering a free happiness course, and that was something that people were talking about. It was at Harvard, and it was a free remote course on happiness. So yes, I think those types of courses are out there, but let's help people identify goals. Eileen, just before we move on, start from scratch hobbies. Cooking is big with my friends. Yeah, I agree. My friends too. We've cooked more in my family than we've ever cooked. So much bread and pizza and blah. But yes, kind of revisiting those scratch type hobbies. So when we think about wellness goals, we're really helping people to, if you can go to the next slide, please, Kati. In these areas, the health and well-being today is what we're really going to focus on. Of course, education, living, social, and employment address some of the other areas, but we're kind of really looking at the health and well-being as those 8 dimensions of wellness. And of course, these other recovery goals fall in there as well. Kati, if you can move ahead. Thanks. Very quickly focusing on this. People have long-term goals, short-term goals, and and what we can help people do are develop SMART goal plans that help address both those long-term goals and what some of those short-term goals might look like in the middle. We don't have time, obviously, today to go over the difference, but just to kind of recognize that we're really looking at helping people identify what that long-term goal looks like, but also breaking it down and helping the person break it down and prioritize and tackle maybe smaller goals in the interim to really help support that hope, optimism, the belief that goal achievement is possible. You know, when you achieve smaller goals, you're more likely to want to work towards your longer term goals, and kind of that success builds on each success. Kati, if you can go to the next slide, we'll get into our SMART goal. So we talked about this last time. I just wanted to, you can go back to the SMART. If you would, yeah. So this is what we're going to be talking about today: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, or realistic. It's been said both ways, and time bound. Specific, we really want to help when we're helping someone identify SMART goals, identify the who, what, when, where, and how and why. Really very straightforward, and highlight and emphasize what you want to happen. So you really want to help the person be specific, or for your own, you want to be specific in your own wellness goals. Measurable, you want to maybe include a numeric or descriptive measurement. You want to be able to see progress and changes over time. Attainable or achievable is another A that's been swapped out. What resources are needed? It should be realistic and should require some effort, but it should also be within reach of the person. So it shouldn't be something so far out that the person will never achieve it, or you know, if you take my physical dimension of wellness, you know, if it's something running a marathon, that's something I'll never achieve and probably will never work towards because it's so unachievable. So you want it to be attainable at least, and reachable. And then realistic or relevant is another word that's been used for the R. It should be consistent with what the person wants to do. So if the larger goal is you know, reducing numbers so that your cholesterol is where it should be, then maybe a relevant, realistic goal might be to work towards that in a small, you know, maybe cutting back on fatty foods or whatever that might be. But we're gonna break down some of the goals to really provide some good examples. And then time bound, set a realistic time frame. So taking my marathon example, if I wanted to scale that back to a 5K, probably not reasonable that I would be doing the turkey trot at Thanksgiving time that my neighborhood has, but maybe reasonable that I would be doing something in the spring, like March or April, if I was committed and set some objectives to you know, increase stamina and exercise more. But having that realistic target to work toward is very important. Kati, you can move forward. Wellness goals. So, you know, goals in general all more than likely support an area of our wellness or one of the dimensions of wellness. But let's think about each of the wellness areas, and we're going to highlight 3 of those areas in our next part of the presentation. And we're going to ask if the goals meet the SMART goal format. Nancy writes, also important that they are their goals, not our goals. Thank you for mentioning that, Nancy, because that's unfortunately often not the case, right? I mean, it's sometimes people have canned or you know, treatment plans or recovery plans that are kind of very similar looking for each person, and really getting from that person using some of those wellness assessments and other tools that you all identify to really get from that person, elicit and evoke, using some motivational interviewing techniques to get what their goals are. Because we know that when it's not really something that we're interested in or very meaningful, or to go back to the R, relevant to us, it's not very likely that we'll achieve that goal. Thank you for bringing that up, Nancy. You can move on, Kati. So some examples, we're just going to go through these and you can use your chat. We have about 10 minutes. So physical wellness. So here's an example of a SMART goal. This might be, the longer term goal might look something like, I will lose 30 pounds by the end of the year or something like that. This shorter term goal, to get to that, I will eat 4 more servings of vegetables and 2 more servings of fruit a day for the next 2 weeks. So let's look at each of those areas. So is the goal SMART? Is it specific? You can just write in the chat yes or no, or Y or N. So yep. So what makes it specific? The numbers, absolutely. So there's some baseline that the person eats, and they want to eat 4 more servings of that, and they want to eat 2 more of the other. So yes, those numbers. How about measurable? Is this goal measurable? Yes, yep. Let's see, I got a lot in there. Let me just peek at the chat. Yes, yep. You can measure as, you can measure it, right? You know, if you ate 4 more servings than you did prior, right? You have a baseline, so you know that. How about attainable? Is this something attainable? Yes, if the person can afford it, absolutely. So I guess that would be, you would really need to have that discussion with the person to see if it's attainable. Is that something that the person is able to achieve? And I would, Elizabeth's writing, let's see. Would it be helpful to provide the baseline of how many servings of vegetables and fruit that probably the person already eats? Yeah, so if the person is only eating 2 servings of vegetables a day, or even 1 serving of vegetables a day and no fruit, then yes, I think seeing that laid out, what the jump would need to be, as Elizabeth mentioned, could help you really see if it's attainable. But again, that's a discussion that you need to have with someone to see if that's something within reach. Is it a reachable goal? Have that honest and open discussion and try to elicit from the person whether that's something that's attainable. Is it relevant and realistic? So the long-term goal might have sounded something like, I will lose 30 pounds by in a year, by January of 2022. So yes, it is relevant. And is it time bound? Yes, yep. So what's the time frame? 2 weeks, right? You could even put an actual date, whatever works best for the person. So you can put the whatever that date 2 weeks from now might look like. But yeah, so here's an example of a wellness. Kati, can you scroll through? Thank you. Intellectual. Yes, Eileen, that's a great suggestion. Ask the person how they imagine they might achieve it. So yes, have the person kind of visualize and walk through how they imagine achieving it, and then you get to hear their thought process behind it. I will complete the remaining 5 classes in coding to obtain my computer programming certificate by May 2021. Specific? Yep. Measurable? Yeah, you know, when you've completed the classes, you get a grade and you have a transcript. Attainable? might be if the person only has 5 classes left, you would have to have that discussion. You know, presumably they've already taken a portion of those classes if they have a remaining set of classes to take. So chances are it's attainable. Is it relevant and realistic? Now, absolutely. In today's environment where everything's remote and people are really on their computers more than they've ever been, absolutely relevant. And if it's something that will help that person reach their goal of obtaining the certificate, so taking those classes is clearly relevant and realistic. And is it time bound? Yep. It's got the deadline, May of 2021. So Kathy, you can just quickly go to the next one, and you can have this just as a resource. This is the occupational example. I think you're all right on the mark with it. And if you're supervisors, these could even be certain types of tasks or ways that you might even be able to teach staff how to do SMART goal planning. So if we can go on to the next slide, and if you could think of a wellness goal that you're comfortable sharing. Yes, Rachel, complement the work and effort put in towards the attempt or modify the goal. Let's see, I've just been looking at one of the chats. And then it looks like there's another chat. Yes. Think of wellness. Think of a wellness goal that you're comfortable. I don't know if we need to share it or if you can just think about it. But use the chat if you wanted to get some feedback on writing the SMART goal format, and it could be either long-term or short-term goal, and to remember to follow the format. Is it specific? Is it measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound? Okay, so we have a few in the chat. So I will move my body for at least 15 minutes a day over the next 3 months. So move my body could mean, and Tommy, that could be something that you would probably want to clarify. Is it walking? Is it running? Is it just any movement, kind of using like the fitness tracker type situation, as long as you're getting your steps in. Measure food and watch portions. I think you might want to add a time bound for that, Eileen, and make that a little more measurable. But absolutely, Elizabeth, I will walk for 20 minutes a day, every day for 4 weeks. Yep. So rake and bag leaves, again, might need a little bit of, adding a time frame and adding some more measurable characteristics to that. Maybe I'll rake for 15 minutes. I'll bag leaves for 30 minutes a day until the street sweeper comes and sucks them away. I love that. For me, it's moments of practicing silliness or stillness, both. Probably that stillness is so important. Yoga, walking. I love, Elizabeth brings up a good point. Many of the individuals that she's working with, the goal needs to really be small steps. So Kati, you can move on to the summary and but thank you for all of your interaction. And we looked at the 8 dimensions of wellness. Again, I apologize for the whole computer PowerPoint situation. I'm not sure how that happened, but nevertheless, we got through it. And we looked at applying and reviewing SMART goal planning to wellness goals. Feel free to use those materials when you're working with staff, if you're supervisors or for your own. But Kati, if you can move to the resources. I just want to show people all of these resources are included. 8 dimensions of wellness. That link has lots of good information. Also on the that assessment slide, we didn't get a chance to look at the 8 dimensions of wellness, but it's here listed, and you could go into that manual and do the assessment. And also there are lots of great resources to use when working with someone. But thank you. Again, apologize for the little computer glitch, but this is real life, and this is what we're dealing with. And many of you are managing it all the time, and the services that you're providing and the telehealth. So thank you. I appreciate your flexibility. And Kati, if you just wanted to go to the evaluation information. My email is on the slide. You'll get this. So please feel free to email any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. But again, thank you for your interactions, and it was fun to be here with everyone today.
Thank you, Joni. So as Joni mentioned, we are at the top of the hour. Actually, we went a little over, and I just want to respect everyone's time. But if you could please take a moment to complete our survey. The QR code is on your screen. Our network is funded through SAMHSA to provide this training. And as part of receiving this funding, we are required to submit data related to the quality of this event. So please take this brief survey. I will also email the link to our survey to all the participants today. In the next couple of days, I will also email your certificate, a link to the webinar recording, and a link to our presenter slides, so that you can also use as a resource and share with their colleagues, and as you know, as you find that best benefits you and your organization. As always, thank you for joining us today. We hope that you stay safe and well. And if you have any questions, please let us know. I'm looking in the chat that some people did not receive a webinar link, so I will note these emails. I will jot them down. Thank you for letting us know. And Joni, do you have any final words before I
No,
close
just
the
thank
webinar?
you, and I hope everyone stays safe and take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.